Got it.
Got it.
Hey, brothers and sisters, welcome back to Esoteric Side, the institution, website, podcast where we start a dialogue about esoteric wisdom, psychology, and spirituality, so you guys can apply stuff in a practical way to your everyday lives. My name is Dr. Alex Aldana. I'm a therapist and astrologer, and with me today we have a beautiful new co-host today. Maddie's still with us, just not this episode, and Whitney's going to be interacting more and more as part of the program. She is a Kundalini yoga instructor and astrologer information as well. Miss Whitney, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you. Happy to be here.
So we've had our guest here twice before. I'm just briefly introducing him. Vlad is started out as a medium, and through his evolution as a person, through interaction with different incarnated beings and non-incarnated beings, he became a spiritual healer or energetic healer, and he founded this concept of realized medicine, which is essentially working on yourself spiritually, energetically, to be a better individual and to be also a healthier individual, because most of his work, as far as I understand, has to do with health. So the topic of today's show has to do with health and illness and how it trickles down from spirituality to psychological and emotional roots into the physical body. Mr. Vlad, how are you today?
I'm okay. Thanks for asking. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's beautiful every time you're on, my friend. So Whitney, do you have any introductory questions, or do you kind of just want Vlad to give us an understanding of how this whole spirit and emotional and psychological concepts interact with your body to give you either health or not? How do you want to begin, Ms. Whitney?
So not wanting to step on Vlad's toes because he is the teacher, I did think of an example, which was the first interaction that I ever had with you, Vlad. And I don't know if you remember this, but my boyfriend at the time, Mason, who is like RIP, amen. He had pulled his groin. And so I was like, I was wary of you. So I was just kind of like standing back, like just watching, like not really believing whatever it was doing. And so
were you watching while I was trying to touch his groin? Is that
while you were touching, yeah. You were like, you were energy doing it. So I was like just standing back, which for the history of our relationship, mine and Mason's relationship, was just like super tumultuous. At this point, I think we'd been together like 5 or 6 years, on and off, fought all the time, like nothing wrong with either one of us, just like together, just explosive, and I always was just like, I'm just gonna leave, no, I'm gonna stay, no, I'm gonna leave, no, I'm gonna stay, in my mind. But like I never said these things to him, I never said these things to anybody. So you were working on him, and then you turned and looked at me and you were like, what does thou shall not steal mean to you? And I was just like, it means like don't take stuff that doesn't belong to you. And you're like, that doesn't mean shit. And I was like, okay. And I was wearing a crystal necklace because I'm a massage therapist like for 18 years. So I was wearing this crystal necklace, and you said you think the master of the universe, the creator of everything, gives a shit if I take your little trinket there, talking about my crystal. And I was just like, oh God. And you're like, it doesn't mean anything. It can be it can be replaced. These things are replaceable. The only thing that you can take from someone that can never be returned is their time. So you need to stop like effing around with this guy. You need to make your decision. Are you going to leave or are you going to stay? And stop stealing from him. You're stealing from his soul and you're stealing from your own soul. And I was just like, and then you were just like, that's it. And you just walked away. So first of all, I was just like, what the fuck? Who is this guy? And then second of all, it was interesting because you don't know this, but Mason turned around to me, and you're saying all of this in front of him. And in my head, I'm just like, oh my God, like.
I warned you, right? Somebody warned you that
no. But I was just thinking like, oh my God, like me and Mason are going to brawl later, like with what you just said. And he turned to me and was like, did you understand any of that? And I was like, what? And he's like, I didn't get any of that. And I was like, oh, me either, you know, because I was just like too fucking weak to have that conversation. But it like, I realized late, because in my mind, I'm like, what's wrong with Mason? Like, he's so smart. How did he not? You were very clear with what you said, but it opened up first this like idea that as his partner, our interaction was impacting his physicality, and that if you're not ready for this information, it'll be said clear as day directly in front of your face. And you're just like, what the fuck did you just say? You know, because like he didn't understand it at all. And it was so clear to me, but it was for me.
Wait, I think he understood. He was such a kind kid, you know.
I know.
He never imagined that somebody would be so straight and say something so outlandish right in front of him. You know, I think he was just shocked. He understood, and from that point forward, you know, as we interacted, he's an incredibly smart young man.
Yeah, yeah. That was what got me, was like he could intake and store a massive amount more information than I could, you know. So it was just so shocking to me that like this thing that was spoken so clearly that just like took me back, made me not even want to talk to you. And he just like didn't, it was just like not, it didn't go in at all. And I realized later, like it was something I was prepared to hear, but it just wasn't something that he was prepared to hear yet, you know? So that was like kind of when you were, Alex, when you're talking about what we were talking about today, that was like the first interaction that came to my mind that really showed a physical connection between like relationships and, you know, your soul connection and all that shit. Also an elevated interpretation of the commandments.
That's awesome. Yeah, and as far as him feeling is growing because of the interaction between you two. So Vlad, can you explain how all this trickles down from soul, or how health or illness works as far as your understanding? So, because I understand that Ms. Whitney kind of when she interacted with you, she understood that the physical illness that her partner at the time was having came from their interaction and his emotions and his psychology with respect to that. And it all has a spiritual principle of not stealing people's time, of not being indecisive. So can you explain that a little bit more, first to the audience in general, and then we'll see more individual examples to maybe clarify?
So all of my understanding is from individual examples. And because I was blessed to have a kind of a clearer view, not for myself, mind you, but for others. So it didn't absolve me from the human experience. I still had to fall on my face numerous times. But look, I don't subscribe to statistics. I don't subscribe to hereditary illness. I'm not interested in flu season or allergy season. There is no such thing as chronic, and there's no such thing as terminal. Everything that the Creator created, it can uncreate. You have to be willing to take steps to encounter yourself. So if the physical body is an expression of the soul's intent, then it's a constant vibrational gathering of cells that expresses itself so that you and I can see each other. The less spiritual, meaning the less, if you're not engaged in fueling your soul, you diminish your soul's light and the energy of the soul. And so the physical body then hardens, atrophies, sclerotes, and becomes physical material where the medical community can interject and then have their way. So the medical community is fantastic for people who live in statistics, worst case scenario, flu season and allergy season, and of course, terminal and
a materialistic view of the world. Yeah, in other words, absolutely. Yeah.
So look, if you have an appendix, and you choose not to, the fact that it formed itself, which means you have access baggage that you haven't resolved emotionally. So if you run to the medical community and let them cut you and remove it, well, then they've punctured your energetic external arc line, and now you're subject to, you're relegated to the physical obstacles and physicals happenstance and all the things that happen as a result of being punctured. But if you constantly engage yourself in accepting is that your pain and your injuries and your incidents and your accidents and your illnesses are a direct, indirect connection with your emotional, intellectual, and spiritual life, then you can resolve them that way.
So for people that might not be familiar with the concept of materialism versus idealism, right? So just to quickly explain, materialism is the understanding that consciousness is created by physical things, like your brain creates a consciousness and whatever, right? And what really matters is the material, the physical. And idealism is the exact opposite. If materialism works from the bottom up, idealism works from the top down, where consciousness creates reality and material things, right? So essentially what you're saying is that the medical standard world views everything from a materialistic perspective, and you are looking at it from an idealistic perspective for consciousness creating this, right? I've spent many years kind of studying the emotional psychological root of illness, and I've healed many patients and stuff, right? Curiously enough, I have a cyanatic nerve pain that I can't get rid of, even though I've helped other people heal their many illnesses, right? So I studied emotional and psychological root of illness, and I do know that between spirit and the body, there is kind of this psychological mental world that interprets and that has to adjust to it. So your phrase, or the phrase from your school, is form follows function. So spirit, God, or whatever, this creative force that animates us has abilities or capacities, and in this physical human experience, they are expressed through, for example, the ability to create with our hands, right, or to do a certain task. So if something that goes wrong with our hands, it might be our ability to do something or our perception for it, right? Can you explain that a bit more through some examples?
So what you're talking about is the idea of form follows function, right? So I have a young man that comes, he's a student. He traveled around the world, and I saw him a long time ago, got his life together, traveled around the world. Now he's here in Florida. He recently hurt his knee. And so he's constantly torn about, he's a Muay Thai instructor. He's a trainer. And he hurt his knee, and he came to see me about healing his knee. Well, he's constantly torn about being in a community, being observant, dating just one girl, and then there's a part of him who wants to live downtown and go to clubs and hang out and do the things that a 30-year-old single young man would do. And really what feeds him is the life of community. Even though he doesn't have a family or a wife or children, it really does feed him. He's calmer, and interestingly enough, he's constantly inspiring others to live that life. So really, he's verbalizing to others what he really needs to do for himself. So he's unable to move forward, or he's now moving forward with pain. He hurt his knee training Muay Thai, which means he hurt his knee fighting with himself. So his struggle with himself manifested physically, which is giving him pain in his movement forward. You understand? What the legs are a form for a function to move forward. Well, the knee specifically is the part of the knee that got hurt, is the part that holds the two bones together, the femur and the fibula, right? Whitney, it's a fibula.
Are you talking about below the knee, the tibia and the fibula?
Tibia and the fibula, yes. So he hurt that part of his knee, which means there's a separation. Think about what the body literally speaks to you. In the way he holds things together, in the way he keeps himself together, is giving him pain. How do we keep ourselves together? Spiritually committed. So his internal struggle with himself about living downtown and being a loose cannon and chasing girls and going to clubs and getting drunk and doing the things that he thinks are good for him. Oh, I'd rather go down there, get an apartment. There's clientele. There's no clientele down there. You can't train anybody down there. People are drunk. They're waking up drunk. They don't have time to go train. So he knows these things. He's struggling internally with himself. And so he ends up hurting himself on his right leg, in the knee, in the portion of his leg that allows him to move forward or to be where he is because of his internal struggle. There's a biblical story about this that confirms my belief system. This is how I became observant and religious, because I realized that my understanding that I came with internally has a direct correlation with what you call the Old Testament, the Torah. The story about Jacob. He's running away from his brother that wants to kill him for stealing his blessing, according to the Christian world, but he didn't steal anything. So he was gone for like 20 years. He ended up becoming fully realized. That's what his father Isaac taught him. His father engaged him in understanding. And now Jacob, even when he met Rachel, Rachel's father knew that. That's why he kept him there for so long, because he knew that if Jacob is around, they became wealthier. According to the story, he kept him for 7 years longer. He tricked him to fall in love with Leah instead of Rachel. And he understood that he's fully realized. So they became wealthier as a result of him being there. So eventually, Jacob ends up in some little town and finds out that his brother Esau has found out where he is, and he's coming with 400 men. Esau was a gangster. He's coming with 400 men, and he wants to kill him for stealing his blessing. What's the blessing? This, what we're talking about. That's the blessing. Becoming fully realized, understanding that nothing is happening to us. So according to the story, he goes to sleep. His brother's coming the following day. He's done running. He's literally done with his refinement process. And in his dream, he has a dream that he's struggling with an angel, and he wakes up with a dislocated hip. He was struggling with himself, with the elevated spiritual side of himself, and that part of him that can choose an outcome instead of worrying about how something is going to happen. What his father engaged him in is understanding that you choose your outcome and you fuel it, and then it becomes so. In the process of the struggle, he dislocates his hip. The battle between the practical side, choosing to come out with a sword to greet his brother, or choosing the outcome that he truly wants, coming out with gifts and making peace with his brother. He dislocates his hip. What's the hip? It's the balance of the body. The hips keep balance. It's the scale of the human body. So for everything the reason I have so much conviction in what I believe and how I look at reality in this realized way, why I created realized medicine, because when I started to learn Torah, I realized that text came directly from the source, because whoever wrote that understood how reality works. I wasn't born religious or observant. I got it because it was internally. I saw exactly what was happening to people. So I can interpret the illness or the incident or the accident or the injury and literally see the story behind the injury. So getting back to this young man, I don't want to take up all this time with him, but getting back to this kid, if he chooses to correct his knee, how does he choose? He calls me. He calls me, and I remind him of the truth. I remind him and make these observations. His intellect adjusts itself. He makes space for energy. I push the energy towards him. It fuels the knee. Now he no longer has pain. It's still off, but he's now learning to move forward because he's choosing the life of alignment instead of distraction. And eventually he goes back into place. He doesn't need surgery. He doesn't need a brace. He doesn't need anything. He's what's called healed.
Can I interject? So personally, I have a story related to health, which is my kidney, right? So when me and Mason finally split, I think it was like 8 years or something, 8.5 years that we were together. I had always had this like just puffy weight problem, like puffiness, everywhere. And you had always told me like, this is stagnation, this is stagnant energy, you're not moving forward, you need to do what you need to do and you won't do it. And then, when I left and he finally left the house, when I finally got moved out and then I finally got an apartment of my own, literally like that night, I started passing a kidney stone. And I kept like taking the, what's it called, chunk of pedra or whatever that you like to break up stones. And I was passing like little pieces of stones, but I was just not getting better. And I was ill for 2 months. Finally went to like the actual doctor and found out that I had a kidney stone that was like deeply embedded in the renal pelvis. So it was like so big that it just like couldn't pass through my kidney, and all the tissue around it was dying. So I went in for surgery, thank God, and they took it out. And within 2 weeks, it's like my shoe size went down, my pant size went down. I mean, I just like, I'd been just like, had stagnant fluid just like all over my body. Who knows how long that had been there, this stone. So, it's like, for me, the medical community was a worthwhile situation, although I never paid my hospital bills because they were way too expensive. But, so I'm grateful for that. But it is like, that was a result of my stagnant behavior, that it got to the point where I was like beyond able to deal with it without intervention.
So you exhausted so much of your spiritual energy. You lowered your vibration so much that you became more physical material. So then your options were physical material. You understand?
Yeah.
Had you not done that, then you couldn't deflate yourself.
Yeah.
From what I studied, if I can add to that, the renal system, specifically the bladder, has a lot to do with territory. So you moved into a different territory, and that obviously triggered something. Your space, your area, and sometimes kidney stones, when they block something, from my line of study, which is bioneuromotion, and then new dramatic medicine. Sometimes when a kidney stone forms, it can be to stop a leak of money, right? So maybe some money issues. We're also like forming a lot of part of your unconscious. So moving out to different territory triggered this, and then maybe more money troubles or whatever. And that's what happened.
That's interesting, because I've also heard them like associated with change or something, kidneys, like kidney problems.
That's
like
probably
fear,
just gonna
like a fear of change. I think it's dependent on the person, right? Vlad?
That's gonna kick her ass right now.
I know. I'm afraid. I'm sorry. I even.
Your external space and your external reality happens as a result of your internal correction. Moving to a different place, you take yourself with you. Wherever you go, there you are. So the fact that you move somewhere is going to cause some change. You're going to bring you with you. So if you had a kidney stone and you didn't resolve anything emotionally or intellectually, spiritually, wherever you go, you're taking that kidney stone with you. What's going to happen if you move into a new house or a new state? Nothing.
Oh, I completely disagree with you there.
Unless there's like an emotional, a spiritual change,
of course,
that
of
accompanies
course.
that.
If there's a realistic understanding that please, I don't want to keep speaking. Alex, you had something to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I completely disagree with you on that point, but let me explain why. Sometimes the external change triggers something, right? And for example, when I moved out of my parents' household, like I felt my mom and my dad were kind of stress factors for me, right? And I moved out of there, that factor went away, and then changes happened in my body. So sometimes, like moving to somewhere else, changing an external environment, feng shui masters, I'm just going to give this very brief example. Like some of them say that 33% of your life is your conscious belief, attitudes, psychology, whatever, that you can work on yourself, right? 33% is your environment, your surroundings, how that affects you, and 33% is karma stuff, soul contracts, stuff that you have to go through this physical experience because you're going to learn something or polish your soul or whatever you're going to do. So I do believe that if you if you move somewhere else, you're still carrying yourself around, but maybe that change in your environment trigger something different in you, and that shift that happens in you triggers something else. Go for it. Yeah.
You ready for this? Okay.
Go for it.
You didn't change your environment. You decided that you were sick enough of your parents taunting you to become responsible and take charge of your life. You made an intellectual change, an emotional change to take charge of your life. And that structured understanding, your understanding then changed your environment. So the freedom that you earned to receive your new place was a result of your intellectual and emotional change. So then what I'm saying to you, just like what happened to the Jews in Egypt, when Moses came, he engaged them in understanding that they were enslaved because their perception was enslaved. They thought like slaves, so they became slaves. And Israel, contrary to popular Arab Muslim belief, Israel, the state of Israel, is the center of the world and an expression that is energetically correct for these people that refined themselves for 4 generations and committed themselves no matter what to the word and the technological structure of a manual that sustains them through connection. Meaning, as they changed their understanding and the godless existence that they lived that didn't engage them in ritual life, they became bottom dwellers. They had to slave and toil in the material. As soon as they disconnected from their emotions and understood that they were slaves of their own doing and their perception, a new reality formed to accommodate them. So your new place didn't stimulate your change. Your change was stimulated by you being completely sick and tired of them taunting you. That's why you moved. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. I think he's frozen. Are you there, Dr. Alex?
Of course he's frozen.
Oh no. Oh no, you did.
Yeah. Something happened and I
Of
lost
course it did. Of course it did.
It really did.
Of course it did. It gave you a little moment of numbness so you could get out of your frozen state.
There's
man.
I was
Go
reading
for
a
it.
commentary on Exodus, and it was talking about the when Moses sees the Israelite slave being whipped.
Yes.
And it says Moses looks around and he sees no man. And this was always translated to me as he did this where no one would see. But the commentary I was reading was saying that the Jewish or the Hebrew word used for man is more indicative of he saw a bunch of punk asses. Like he just saw no man there. And
Right.
so it was like Moses's moment where, he lived in this environment where Israelites were being abused and were slaves, and for a while had done nothing. But it was like this spark where he was finally like, oh, if there's no man, I'm going to step up and be a man, and I'm going to intervene. And it was like the beginning of, this story where his people start to have a way out of their slavery. And it's like, so that was your moment, Alex, where You just like decided to be a man and take control for yourself, right?
Yeah, a few years before that, I was at the gym working out, and I kind of this consciously self-sabotage. I got some 80-pound weights on in each end, and I was starting in traps, and I was like, I felt really good about it. I was like, oh, I can do this easily. I got the 90-pound weights, and I was like, yeah. And then I was like, oh, I can do, if I can do 90, I can do 100. So I got the 100-pound weights, and I started doing traps, and I pulled my back out. What was happening in my context at that part of my life is my dad got really sick, and he owned a restaurant then, and he was charging me with being in charge of that, and I didn't want to take charge of, didn't want to be the head of my household there. You know, I was avoiding that at all cost, and I resented the fact that I had to study and then be in charge of the restaurant and do everything else I had to do. So I pulled my back out, which is a column, which is the center of the family, the support system for the family. That's the comment that I had to make there.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you. This will change everything for you. That what you just did in the public forum, that's going to change everything for you. Your perception of yourself and the way you looked at what you thought was true and now is no longer true for you. That's going to create a flood of energy, a flood, because now there's no one to blame. And it's not the apartment that changed your reality. It's not that they left. Well, I spoke to him. I told you that, right? I spoke to Moses. I don't want to get into it, but it's a long conversation. It was through Resnick. It was because of Resnick. He took me into a waking dream, and I interacted with him. My point to your story, and I really appreciate you, what's called coming clean, is that once you embrace something, it's frozen again. Once you embrace, once you embrace your understanding, we'll wait for him to come back.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, I'm back.
Once you embrace your responsibility, then you take your power back. And then, I don't know if you've ever seen The Departed. Jack Nicholson says, I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me. That's what happens. Once you take responsibility, you take your power back. And then you start engaging yourself in restructuring the outside world to express what it is that you believe to be true. The new you that embraces the truth. I was this, and I didn't want to take responsibility. But what the new environment did for me is I was sick and tired of them taunting me and making me do shit that I didn't want to do. So I had no choice but to go and get my own place, because they were done with me and I was done with them. You came out of your own personal Egypt, sir.
That's what I was going to say is Exodus. Like, man, I just go back to Exodus like every day of my life, just the concepts taught in it to teach that are teaching you how to live in freedom as opposed to slavery to whatever, whatever your situation is.
I would like Vlad to comment on, because this whole FOMO, fear of missing out, that this young man he treated with pertaining to his knee was dealing with, I think is something that's really prevalent, and that probably causes a lot of illness in a lot of young people and a lot of people in general. So would you like to share, please, or could you share this, how to deal with this fear of missing out that people have labeled? How should
people or men?
No, people, definitely. Because a lot of women are like, oh yeah, I have some, maybe it's FOMO or whatever. Patience, but it's more men. I do agree with you there.
I think it's a common trend in my parents' generation, and therefore my generation as well, which I'm 36.
Right. Well, if I may, you didn't really, considering who you are with, now that I know you for so long, you entered the human experience into a family where you were forced to find your own way in your path. And actually, where, may he rest in peace, your dad opened the path for you. That's who brought us together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I believe that he engaged you in the possibility by discovering something that was real and that resonated with him.
Yeah.
So people are distracted, men and young men and women. You know, I can talk about myself. You know, I got married at 34, but I thought, oh, you know, I do better when I'm single. I was lost in the sauce when I was single. That's all I did was bounce off the walls because I was too busy being on the prowl. I couldn't stop. You know, I love to hunt. So, you know, it's distracting. Men are delusional that think, and I was one of them, that think that, actually, you know, I don't know if what comes first, the chicken or the egg. You have to be willing to recognize the correct partner, but yet still you have to be in that place to encounter the correct partner. So you have to be willing to correct yourself on your own to encounter and recognize the right partner. And those that are being distracted by the possibilities of, you know, having this life of bohemian lifestyle. Who's this kid? He's not a kid, he's actually in his 40s. He's a guy, he's on Instagram, he's got 15 girls with him all the time. He's a former Navy SEAL. I think he got kicked out of the SEALs. He has a weed company. He's got the horns. I think he's from Texas. Anyway, he's all over Instagram. He's always with a bunch of women, flanked by women. He's got yachts and planes. It's all, his life's falling apart. His business is going down the drain. So it's a delusion, a physical material delusion that we chase that is stimulated by our desire for more, better, and different. There's no way to overcome it. The only way you can overcome it is to go through it. So it just depends how much of it you have in you. So there's no quick fix, really. You know, I can tell you till I'm blue in the face. When you think, you know, I'll tell you the honest truth, you know, I always thought to myself, oh, you know, I have these extraordinary gifts and I'm constantly being discovered by all these interesting people. And I'm going to get discovered and I'm stuck with this haggard bitch from hell who's constantly dragging me down to the floor and making me do shit that I don't really want to do. And she doesn't realize how special I am. And the truth is, she wasn't doing anything. It was me who was dragging me down. It was me who was insecure, reactive, delusional, lived in a world of my perception was skewed of reality because of my past and how I, just because I had special gifts, it didn't mean that I was absolved somehow from the human experience. So to summarize it, young people, it's what being young means. Some people come into the human experience with a bright light. Theodore, my middle child, who's 19, I called him in university and I said, so how's the female population? He goes, Dad, I don't have time for that. I'm focused. You should see him. I mean, he's 6'1", he's super handsome. He's an athlete. He's a captain of every team, 4.9 grade point average. And so it's not because he can't. It's because he can and he doesn't, right? He didn't need to overcome the impulse. He came devoid of the impulse. Does he want to? Of course he wants to. Of course he wants to be the player, but he's not. He lives in his heart, he's kind and he's gentle. He's tough as hell. He trains kickboxing since he's 4. He can squat 300 pounds. He's 6'1", but he chooses not to. So one, to overcome it has to be a choice. You have to make a conscious decision that, as Muji says, you have to choose to stop kissing frogs. That's number one. Number two, you have to find value in yourself. So the value isn't in bigger tits and bigger ass. The value is in the soul. So you encounter another human being who's kind and gentle, and you can surrender into their love, and they're caring, and they're driven, and they have your pace, and they have your understanding and a common denominator, and you're both honest, and you're willing to be transparent and not have any secrets, and not have a secret life, which I always had.
Okay. Whitney.
Go ahead.
Oh, what I found funny is that kind of I always struggled with the top half of my body being pretty big and the bottom half of my body pretty skinny. And I was reading a book where this Kabbalah master says that, you know, your feet, your legs have to do a lot with your roots or with a feminine part of yourself. And since I've been restructuring everything that I am, my legs have gotten bigger, where that before it was a very, very difficult thing. You know, I'm working out maybe even less than I did when I was in high school, but my legs are thicker and bigger now, which I think is a testament to like to my roots, you know, that foundation. I just found that kind of curious, but go ahead, Miss Whitney.
Yeah, like you're coming back, you're getting out of your intellect, coming down to the ground a little bit. Vlad, I was just going to say to your point that Michael is like he's a musician, you know, so he'll send me songs when he's like on the road or whatever. So he sent me this song called Right Down the Line. It's like a Gary or Jerry Rafferty song. So I go to the YouTube video and the comments are all just a bunch of middle-aged women like, oh, if only a man would say this song to me. So I was like, well, all these 50-year-old women would just like love you, Michael. But there's a line in there that says, I threw away all these crazy dreams. I put them all aside. That's like the song dedicated to his spouse or whatever. And at first it kind of made me sad because it was like as a woman, I'm a dream, as your wife, I'm like a dream killer or whatever. But in hearing what you're saying, it's really just like, I became practical about how I'm supposed to be living. Yeah. Like I'm in the world now and not just like, yeah.
I grew up, you know why I got married? I grew up finally at 53.
Yeah.
I grew up. That's all. You know how I live.
Yeah.
And who I lived with.
Jordan Peterson, and I've actually noticed this myself, something happens in the look of a person when they've been through some stuff. When they've grown up, like their face is different. It looks like the mean expression on his face, much like you have, Mr. Vlad. And it's not like that you are a mean person, although I'm sure you have that side of yourself. It's you've been through some stuff, you've matured, so therefore your face has a different look on it, like resting man bitch face, if that's, well, not in that term. That didn't come out right, but you know what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. You're not the first. Our faces, as you know, you're studying with Resnick, are an expression of our internal life, right? It's more confirmation that realized understanding is real. And so my face is an expression of where I am. You know, when I was insecure in my 30s, even though I had extraordinary abilities with living a magical life, I was insecure. So my face was more angular and more Mercurian. You know, I needed to be in many places at one time. You know, I needed to be everywhere. Yeah, the debonair. You know, I could talk my way out of a paper bag, kind of. You know, charismatic bullshit. But as I got older and realized and refined myself and encountered expressions, I promise you, I gauged my life based on the women that I was with. One was a physical, material, beautiful, bodybuilding, feminine, blah, blah, blah. I lived in a 2,200 square foot penthouse with her, drove a Benz, but it was empty, just empty. She was a sweetheart, super, great friend, but no order, no consistency, no nothing. You couldn't do anything with her. She's still lost in thoughts, running around Miami. So the more I gathered myself emotionally, then I started to encounter more concrete people. You know, my ex, I mean, I'm not going to get into that, but
She's great. She's a great person.
she's incredible, super smart, super tough,
Super funny.
funny as shit. She's, she's something, but no boundaries. So that was my part of my life where I had no boundaries and thought I could live without boundaries. And I discovered there's insanity that comes with living with no boundaries. And that insanity literally made me gray. I mean, it took me to another level of maturity. And where I finally realized, she'll be fine. I'm gonna die. This is not a joke. I have to separate, kind of like you with Mason, and I separated myself. Now we're great friends, we're great parents together. I talk to her every day.
Yeah.
So I encountered the new me, the one that's willing to be concrete, willing to be committed, willing to be transparent. I'm not hiding my phone. Everything's in the open. We have a common denominator. We're religious, we're observant, everything works because I'm willing. So my environment didn't change because I moved from Texas to Florida. My environment changed as a result of my own personal choices.
Yeah. That was a big thing when me and Michael got together. It was like we had one argument and I was like, okay, I'm not fighting ever again. Like, I'm never going to be in a relationship where I fight all the time. So if that's what we're trying to do, then this is just not going to work, and it's such a crazy experience to like be in a position where you've just made that choice, that you're just not lowering your experience to that level.
Yeah, there's a difference between having a discussion when you're trying to be right and having to push your point across to when you're open and having a dialogue with a person. You're probably gonna have a lot of disagreements in a marriage, but it doesn't mean you have to be mean to each other about it. I wanted to make one last comment because I know we're running short on time. In this whole process of correcting, right? Because we were talking. Give me a second. There's a dog barking. Can you? While he shuts up, can you make another question, Miss Whitney?
Oh, okay. Vlad, can we talk for 1 second about the concept of like the Israelites? This may be too long a question, like too long an interaction.
Maybe is it biblical or is it?
It's
practical?
biblical. Well, it's biblical, but in a practical, trying to make it practical.
Let's do it.
So the story of Exodus, the Israelites are enslaved. And then there's a point where after I don't even remember how many years and years.
210 years.
Okay. So the point where they cry out to their God, and it says like they remembered their covenant with him. So they remembered like, oh, we have a God that can help us. And they call out to him.
That's what you did. You remember. You put back together things that you knew.
Yeah, definitely. I was atheist. I hadn't prayed in years. And I was in a fight with Mason. I fell to my knees and I'm like, God, what am I to get? I literally said, get me out of this hell I have created for myself, without even knowing what that means, and then Mason met you. That's how I met you. But so the Israelites say, like, they call out to their God. And then God remembers his covenant with them also and answers. So the way that it's written, it could be read to indicate that God forgot or God made them wait for whatever reason. And most of the commentary on this story will say, it's not for us to know why God made them wait. Like, we don't know why God does what he does. And to me, that's just like a cop out. And it's a super important part of the story, because this story is supposed to be teaching us how we are to how we are to get out of things that we're enslaved to, situations or ideals. So like, let's talk about that. What did God make them wait for no reason? Do we have an indication of why?
So you and I both understand God didn't do anything to them. That's a small-minded perception of the creative force, to insinuate that it's a human and it tests us. It doesn't test anything. It doesn't do anything to us but create. But we have to be have the space to receive its energetic flow. And to be in the flow, you almost have to toil in the material and be exhausted by your impulsive, habitual, physical behavior in order to connect with it. So they needed 210 years of slavery to finally to be exhausted enough to have a physical manifestation of liberation that said, wait a minute, I'm the oppressor and I'm the oppressed. I'm both. I can choose what I want to be. If I'm willing to engage myself in understanding that there's a greater divine force, and as I move myself out of my attachment to the physical human reality and engage with it in my daily life, it fuels me and expands my soul's perception, which engages my intellect and my desire to and my conviction, and I start to co-create a new reality that expresses the new me. So they needed the 210 years, and God didn't forget anything. Remember, what you remembered, put back together, as Resnick would say, you came with it. So the covenant means they came with an internal innate ability to do this, to be co-creators. Because remember, they came from Abraham.
Yeah.
Isaac and Jacob. They were all fully realized people and understood the power of deliberate intent and understood how consciousness works.
Yeah, it's a free will thing. It's like if they chose to disconnect and forget, God has to allow for that choice. So it's not that God remembered, it's that they remembered. And God said, okay, if you remember, then I'll remember too.
He didn't say anything. Right?
Well, I mean, you know what I mean.
You know, when you learn, it's a very interesting phenomenon. Both of you are learning healing through imagination and phenomenology, your phenomenology course, right? So this is something I discovered through personal experience. You know, when I treat people and all of a sudden they're in their guided imagery, and all of a sudden they have this random vision, they say, oh my God, I saw myself dancing with my children cancer-free. Well, that wasn't contrived. That was an image that came spontaneously, which means you take one step towards God, God takes 5 steps towards you. Mm-hmm. So when you encounter and you start to resolve and discern your part and get honest with yourself and engage yourself in receiving, it expands your soul, and then it gives you images and confirmation that the creative force actually exists and engages with you. It's always there. You're out of the flow. Yeah. It doesn't deviate from us. We deviate from it. Yeah. So he didn't forget anything. It doesn't forget. All it does is create.
Yeah.
We are its children. Why would it punish us? So we punish ourselves.
Yeah.
Since the topic of this was health, and I kind of want to start wrapping this up, but I do have a question pertaining to health and illness. We've been talking about how spirit and beliefs and ideas and situations will cause different illnesses and our understanding to it, but is it always that, or is it sometimes because we've talked about past lives and other things. Is it sometimes kind of a debt or something you're paying from a past life, or is it something you still need to learn? Is it always just spirit trickling down through your understanding and your life experiences and it being kind of this correction that needs to be done, or is it sometimes also kind of this karma or whatever way that you're carrying from a past experience in a past lifetime?
So. What, you got any comments?
Yeah, I do, but I don't want you to tear me apart. But I do, I think like
when is that phone? Has that phone ever rang with a complaint about me?
Who, me?
Me?
I do think that there are experiences that your soul comes to have for a purpose of refinement, but maybe it's our limited beliefs that keeps us. It's like in morphology, a person with a certain type of intellect has like a super positive side to that or a super negative side to that inclination. And we get to like ride that wave. So it's potentially the same for a physical ailment, that there could be a greater potential for how you live in the world, having come in with that experience. But it just depends on like where your belief is. I don't know if that makes sense.
How you fuel your potential. Potential doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything. It's
Right.
meaning.
Right.
There are tons of people living here in Miami that live in Frigidaire boxes. They have great potential, but they're smoking crack. So potential
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So look, remind me a little bit of the original question.
Is illness always
Yeah,
kind
it
of
always has to be.
spirit
Yeah.
and psychological in the moment kind of experience, or is it something we carry on?
How can it be a one point yes and another point no? Of course it's always. The flow is constant. The only reason the next moment appears before you is because the flow is constant, and depending on your vibration, the next moment is an expression of the broadness of your view of reality. So of course, it's constant in everything. There are no accidents. There are only incidents that are.
But you mentioned the soul coming in from lifetime to lifetime, correcting itself, right?
So look, I do have. I might have addressed this in our previous conversation. I treated a kid whose mother was my son's doula. Remember that story about the little girl who had while I was treating her for asthma, I saw a memory in the soul of drowning. Have I ever told you the story? And she drowned in a past life, and now she entered a family with people who don't have a path or a way, both smoke weed, both take away their breath, both are disconnected from the creative force. And so their physical manifestation, the expression, they receive a child that struggles with breathing. So when I'm treating her, I see a drowning in the past experience, in the past life. And the father says, wow, she listens, I think she was 6. She listens to an instructional CD for little kids that talks about not drowning. I think it was called Little Ducky. So it plays music and talks about how to swim and so on. And the moment after I treated her, moving forward, she stopped listening to it because now she received enough light to resolve that attachment that consumes her, where she's emotionally overwhelmed. What is drowning? Being emotionally overwhelmed. Drowning, like today, people are drowning in pneumonia. Water doesn't belong in the lungs, so they're drowning in their own emotions, the fear of what could happen to them, that they can die. So yes, partially, you could get sick because you carry it into the new human experience, your attachments, your understanding, your belief system, and so on. But it's not by chance, and it's no accident that in your new existence, you're getting asthma or skin rashes or whatever it is that's happening. It's based on where you are right now. Whether your soul has that memory or not, you still entered a life with parents and circumstances that is an expression of what process you're supposed to go through to refine yourself.
I think that's a very good point with which to end the show, so we can keep it under an hour. Ms. Whitney, any closing comments? Vlad, any closing comments?
No, thank you so much. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you guys. We'll again put links to Vlad's information in the comment section below and everything. And thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been Esoteric Psi.
I'm